So I know it's kind of like a very controversial statement, but I think that's what my clinical practice has shown, and there's some research to even back that up.
Crying, but that...
This is a super, super true point, and it's really toxic. And again, people do not talk about it enough.
Suddenly, I become a villain.
It's a...
I hate this so much. I hate this so much. I hate this so much, and it's 100% true. Not only we lost the fight, you're actually the fucking bad guy. And the most frustrating thing there is that, and this was why so many of mine, the last 2 years with Melina, I repeated this line over and over again, although she never gave a fuck, it never mattered. But I'd constantly say, like, listen.
With male suicide. So the number one thing that correlates with male suicide is not depression, and this is super scary. There's one study I saw recently that suggests that 50% of men who kill themselves have no history or evidence of mental illness. And this, I believe the statistic in my clinical practice because I know what depression looks like. I know what bipolar disorder looks like. And half the men that I've worked with, at least, are not actually mentally ill. See, mental illness means a pathology of the mind, which means that the mind is malfunctioning. Most of the suicidal men that I work with, their mind isn't malfunctioning. They genuinely have a life that is no longer worth living. They're looking at things and objectively realizing that there's no way out of this situation. So they turn to suicide. So I know it's kind of like a very controversial statement, but I think that's what my clinical practice has shown, and there's some research to even back that up.
I can understand making a strong statement here to illustrate that the problem isn't just to convince them that their lives are good, but the problem is we actually need to change the direction or the trajectory of people's lives. But I still don't know if I would. I feel like if you're committing suicide, except for in exceptional circumstances, I feel like there has to be a mental illness at play, except for in like exceptional circumstances. I've had 3 friends who committed suicide, all of them men. 2 were married, 1 had a 4-year-old daughter. All of them had lots of close friends. 1 was a highly paid surgeon. Life's not worth living is bullshit intended to pander to a social media audience. That it's like an extreme statement for, I don't want to say for clicks, but like it's a hyperbolic statement to get eyes on your statements, basically. Yeah. Sounds like a fulfillment issue. Yeah, it sounds like if you're in an area, so like for instance, I believe that people can get to a point to where their life is not worth living. But in order for you to think that your life is not worth living, I think you have to have like some kind of mental illness going on. Except for, like I said, in some circumstances, like if you've got extreme failing health, such that you're just like in pain all the time. Like I said, there are some exceptions that I can understand, but for the most part, I don't think. I think it means life's not worth living is a conclusion people arrive at after a lot of thought rather than a malfunctioning brain. I disagree. I don't think that's the case. Something is fucked in your brain then, because there's just not, humans acclimate, a healthy brain acclimates to an unbelievable amount of stuff. Like even, I've said this before on stream, I think it says yesterday, even people who are like handicapped, like you can lose both your legs, you can become quadriplegic, you can have shut in or locked in syndrome, and even these people's happiness will acclimate surprisingly quickly. So the idea that you've done some rational analysis of your life and like, wow, I need to kill myself. Something is not working here. I think something is not working here. I can't tell you whether your life is worth living, but I can tell you that there are a lot of people you can help if you stick around, and if you commit suicide, you're walking out on all the people you could be helping. Okay, that's like the worst. Fuck that. Nah, fuck that. That's cringe, I think. Unless you've got like children, sure, but. Everyday life for many people is mundane, and that mundane existence isn't one that people today want to live. I mean, I disagree. I think that there are other reasons why people think they don't want that lifestyle. I feel like that comes from a lot of social programming as well. There might be, if we watch the rest of the video around this, maybe he pads this out a bit more. What could be an example of a rational suicide? I think most of it would come down to like medical stuff. Like if you legitimately had like chronic pain and it was making you miserable for the rest of your life or something, then I could understand you wanting to die. How do you explain the higher rates of suicide? Is it mostly correlated to people are being mentally ill? Well, my guess is going to be it's undiagnosed. That'd be my guess. That the depression is undiagnosed. So it wouldn't surprise me if most people that kill themselves aren't diagnosed with depression, but they probably have something else going on. They just don't have diagnosed. And you can't really autopsy a person's brain for. So accept the rest of life will be miserable and lonely whilst watching everyone else have kids and wives and live happy lives whilst being a loser working for $18 an hour at a dead-end job. Yeah, I think that there's like other stuff. I mean, like there are other things you can do with your life. The problem is that I think the thing that would drive you to suicide there isn't like a rational analysis of your life. It's that there's other things socially that are pushing you to feel unfulfilled or unhappy or something else like that. I think that's like the issue. Because, so for instance, like the easiest example of this is what you might consider a mundane, horrible life. A lot of people throughout time and history, and even on the planet today, would kill to be in your position. Like if you were to go to some kid in some fucked country where it's either starving or ravaged by civil wars or standards of living are so low, and they're like, listen, you can swap places with this American person, but I gotta warn you, your life is going to be quite mundane. They'll be like, okay, and like, I'll do that in a heartbeat, right? So I think that if you feel suicidal, it's not because you're doing some rational analysis. There's a lot of like social factors at play here too. Not to say that doesn't make the social factors fake. Like you can still definitely have those feelings, and the social factors are real and can drive you in that direction. But yeah.
Know what my life
would it
is
not just be a byproduct of social media allowing allowing people to view other successes, having a shit enough life while seeing everyone else doing well type of shit? Yeah, I think that could be a big thing that would play into it. 100%, yes. But then it just depends on what you consider a rational analysis or not, I guess. Like, let's say somebody DM you, they're like, I'm coming to kill you tomorrow, and it's going to be excruciatingly painful. And let's say there's no reason to believe that person, but for some reason you do, and then you kill yourself. Is that a rational decision? Well, it really depends on what we mean by rational at that point, right? Because it is rational if you believe that to be the case. Maybe it would be rational to kill yourself. But if you have no reason to believe that to be the case, or if a better form of analysis would change some of your premises, well, now it becomes irrational. It depends, I guess, on how we define rational here.
Like, how does he have any right to complain? And even your mind will tell you this. You'll look at these people and you'll be like, yeah, I don't have a right to complain. But now we need to stop for a second and think about what it does to your psychology when you as a human being are not allowed to articulate your suffering. I've worked with people who've grown up in abusive households where children will say to their parents, Mommy, Daddy, I'm hurting. And the parent smacks them across the face. How dare you? You're so lucky. You don't realize the sacrifices I make for you. It's traumatizing to the child when they say, I am suffering and no one listens. This is what we're doing to the generation of men. People are saying, realize the sacrifices I make for you. It's traumatizing to the child when they say, I am suffering and no one listens. This is what we're doing to the generation of men. People are saying, I am suffering. For 100 years, men have been killing themselves. 80% of suicides are men. The most dangerous thing for a man under 45 is themselves. And these people have been literally killing themselves because no one has been listening to them. So in the same way that you grow up with as a child in a household that's abusive, where no one takes you seriously, no one listens to your suffering, and now we even have successful men who are not allowed to complain. So the psychological impact is the same. Anytime you have a human being who is suffering in some way and they cannot find connection with another human being, they cannot find compassion with another human being, that person is going to feel isolated. And if you look at the statistics on suicide, it's very interesting. So the number one thing that correlates with male suicide is not depression. And this is super scary. There's one study I saw recently that suggests that 50% of men who kill themselves have no history or evidence of mental illness. And this, I believe the statistic in my clinical practice because I know what depression looks like. I know what bipolar disorder looks like. And half the men that I've worked with, at least, are not actually mentally ill. See, mental illness means a pathology of the mind, which means that the mind is malfunctioning. Most of the suicidal men that I work with, their mind isn't malfunctioning. They genuinely have a life that is no longer worth living. They're looking at things and objectively realizing that there's no way out of the situation. So they turn to suicide. So I know it's kind of like a very controversial statement, but I think that's what my clinical practice has shown, and there's some research to even back that up. So if we sort of look at what's going on with men, we're sort of, they have nowhere to turn to. And the number one thing that correlates with it is not mental illness, but is a sense of thwarted belongingness. So this is kind of like multivariate regression analysis. But basically what happens is what causes people to kill themselves is they try to connect with others and they get rejected. So it's specifically a very specific research term called thwarted belongingness. So I try to belong to a group, and that group, or multiple groups usually, will thwart my attempts to join the tribe, to join the community. And this is what actually correlates a lot with suicidality. So what's going on with men right now is that we really don't allow them to suffer, because then you're not manly. And we're so externalized with our attention that we're not connecting with ourselves. And so we're looking to other people to tell us what it means to be a man. But that may or may not work for you, right? That may have been what worked for them. So then we kind of get into this problem where we're disconnected from ourselves, and then the world doesn't accept us, we're not allowed to suffer, and that's what creates the problem.
What is the remedy to this?
If something horrible happened to you, God forbid, thanks for putting that in, like paralysis, do you think you'd eventually get over it and accept it, or would you want someone to euthanize you? I mean, right now I feel like I'd want somebody to euthanize me. But I mean, like I said, all the data shows that even if bad things happen, eventually you just kind of get used to it. So, yeah. Yeah, I feel like we really, people used to meet people a lot more in real life. Again, I know everybody wants to talk about feminism or red pill or or I don't know, whatever, woke shit or whatever. I really do think that the internet has fundamentally changed so many different ways about how the world works and how we relate to people and everything else. And I feel like people don't talk about that as much as they should be. Maybe because the internet change happened like both gradually and incredibly quickly at the same time, such that like as more and more internet stuff was introduced, we didn't really notice it, but it's like completely and totally overhauled every single facet of our existence, such that even me who grew up without the internet can't imagine life without the internet. I think I've joked about that on stream before, where it's like, I don't know, as kids, I don't know how the fuck we ever found or hung out with each other ever. Because like once I leave my house on my bike, I can't know where my friends are. I don't have a fucking phone to call in and check on who's, but somehow we all managed to meet at the same places. We all managed to hang out together. We all managed to travel and get food and go to the right house. I don't even know how. Like when I try to remember, I just don't even know how it was possible. Because you're lost in space. You're like shot out of a cannon as soon as you leave the house. You're untrackable. You're lost to the wilderness. Yeah, the internet has like fundamentally changed so many aspects of our life.
So I think the first thing is
there was that weird dating chart I saw that where so many different ways of meeting people are now just being exchanged for online stuff. This goes to 2017. This is a statistic. I don't know where this study comes from, but like I should like dig into this and look at like real research and see what the actual shit says. But I see like stuff like this posted over and over and over again. That meeting through friends always used to be the most common way. You'd through friends of friends is how you'd meet like dating partners. But this online stuff is just dwarfing like everything. This is the most like extreme one that I saw recently. Oh no, this was the most extreme one I saw recently. This is showing like around 60% of people are now meeting online first. I think it's similar to how if you try to go back to pre-fast travel games, it breaks people's brains. Maybe, yeah. No opinion laid it off well. I think people like to watch Destiny because he doesn't understand at all the continuous negative thoughts due to the reality of situations. He always seems larger or happier than life. Okay. I could be like, there are a variety of reasons why what I'm about to say could be wrong, namely due to the fact that men don't share feelings with each other. That is possible. But I will say that of all the areas that I've gravitated between in my life, between working poor people, middle class people, and wealthy people, the most suicidal people that I ever knew, were middle class and upper middle class kids. Always. It was always those people. Now, it could be that working poor people are also super suicidal and they just don't talk about it as much, or because in those environments it was a lot of men, so they didn't talk about it as much. But like girls who had double doctor parents or lawyers for families or whatever in high school and college and shit, these were always the people who were talking about suicidal, who were on Prozac, who had all these things that they were talking about. More so than when I worked at like McDonald's or the casino or the carpet cleaning job. I never heard those types of conversations there ever. You kind of just like did your shit and it was just like what life was. Now, but again, it could be that maybe people in those situations just don't talk about it as much and maybe people more in school did. But I know that for a long time, all of these feelings that I have right now, by the way, are completely anecdotally. So there's no research. So I could change my mind on this, by the way, in 2 weeks. So be warned. But I feel like, in my mind, I feel like feeling bad, I'm not saying like clinical depression, but in my mind, feeling really shit about your life is the product of two things. It's the product of comparison, and it's the product of, I was gonna say boredom, but I would say more specifically like lack of fulfillment / boredom. Maybe three things. Those feel to me like the biggest products of, or depression is like a product of those things. Not depression, I'm sorry. Feeling really shit about your life, yeah. Because when you're poor and you're working all the time, like if you've got a lot of time to sit around and do nothing and you see other people advancing in life or whatever and you're just like kind of unfulfilled and you're kind of bored or whatever, but like all of your basic needs are taken care of, it seems like you're more prone to fall into those thoughts. But I could be totally wrong on that. I think I tried to look this up before because I was curious on the data, and the data contradicted my opinion because I think the more poor you were, the higher likelihood you had of things like depression No, but I think the data would technically back that up for suicide, because I think it was older men and people that live on Indian reservations are the most likely to kill themselves. So technically, we're kind of assuming those people are bored or alone, which I think they tend to be, but yeah. Since most people don't have those things in order, and it is very hard to get those things in order, doesn't that make Darky's argument with them not leading lives worth living ring true? I think most people have like things like food and home and stuff in order. In terms of like working poor and struggling, I'm not sure. But it's also weird too, because we're talking about, I think we have to be careful when we conflate things, because right now Dr. K is talking about, I don't know if he's talking about all men or young men. He sounds like he's talking about young men, but when we cite suicide statistics and we look at how men are dramatically killing themselves more than women, I think that's largely because of men over 40. Suicidality by age and gender, I think. Let me see if I can, let's look at this. Deaths per 100,000 resident population by suicide in the US. So the 25 to 44, I hate that banding. I'd much rather see like up to 30 and then 30 to 40 or something. I hate this banding together. How cringe. This is deaths per 100,000 residents. I'm sorry. Can I see this percentage wise? 50. This would be 54. This would be 54. This would be 40. Okay. So I think like, what would we say? About 70% of all suicides are 45 and older. And then 30% of all suicides are 15 to 44. I bet that this skews up as you get older, but I can't tell, but yeah. This would largely be because of loneliness. That's what I've read that, but I don't think in a study, I think just in articles, that if you're a man, especially if you get divorced or if the kids move out, or your wife or your widow and nothing's going on in your life, you just kind of die because you kill yourself because you're like, because I think men have a really hard time building social networks and building out friendships and everything, whereas women tend to do a lot better at that. Women do it so much better that if you're a man, one of the, now I'm not gonna say one of the best things, but I think a good thing you can do for your health as a man is just getting married, because men that are married tend to commit less crime. Men that are married tend to live longer and healthier lives. And this is probably causally linked, because if you take a man who gets divorced, he'll go back to being unhealthy or having a higher propensity for crime and shit. So it's not just like, oh, well, healthy and men that don't commit crime tend to get married more, although that's probably part of it. But even if you break that link and they get divorced or widowed, then I think that the criminality rates increase and the depression or loneliness rates or suicide rates increase. But look at figure 2. Hold on. Maybe our definitions of working class are different. A lot of the working class guys I grew up with had extensive criminal records by the time they were 30, maybe a felony. I know so many guys who battled a drug addiction, got clean, started a family, then died at 30 to suicide, or most of the working class people I knew didn't have a ton of felonies. I don't know if I knew anybody with felonies. I think working class and like criminal background are two different things. I don't think those always go together. That's it. You just got caught up in the stream, but isn't being in a situation like starvation, war, etc., different than being in a fucked situation on your own? I guess maybe it feels different. Sure. Happy St. Patrick's Day. Is that really today? I think isolation is comfortable / addicting after too long. You get used to it and change becomes scary. I don't think it's that. I don't think it becomes comfortable. I think that the problem is that there's an uncomfortable hump that you have to get over to break it, and that hump can be paralyzing. There's a name for this. I always reference this. I never look up. I think it's called, is it called decision paralysis? No, I feel like there's a name for this. It has to do with like discomfort preventing you from making decisions. So like if you can measure, it's like if you measure your happiness or something on a graph, fuck this, it would be like, this is where you're at right now. And if you make a decision or if you have to go through some friction, it's going to f up a little bit. But then after you get through this, your life is going to be way better. But this hump right here, or bump or valley, prevents you from ever getting to up here. You won't do this thing because you're going to have a, this just you. Analysis paralysis? I don't know what it's called. It's hard to break the mold of isolation, incredibly difficult. I feel like the problem with isolation isn't that it's hard to break isolation. Breaking isolation is probably actually really easy. I think the problem is the people that tend to get isolated are that way because of a long life of a lack of development of certain types of skills to not be isolated. Like if you take a relatively social person and you stick them in a new city or some area, they could probably make friends with you. They'll probably go out and be okay. But if you take like a person who's lived as a very isolated person their whole life, and then you give them like 5 or 10 friends, and eventually they lose those to attrition or whatever over time, they won't make new friends, right? I think the issue is the skills and everything you develop along the way just aren't there for people that are super isolated. And then I think the really difficult thing is once you're out of school and once you're out of like childhood shit where you're forced to be around people, if you haven't developed those skills yet, you're really, really, really fucked. Because now the only friends you could possibly get are coworker friends. And then depending on how your job is set up, you might just be completely fucked. How fast can you learn those skills? I don't know. I feel like you learn those skills over your entire childhood, adolescence. And then if you don't have them by the time you're graduating college or in the work world, you're in dire straits. Why do you think suicides dipped during COVID? I don't know. Maybe the world was more interesting. People had shit to look forward to. Like it was less mundane. I'm not sure. I would have to see like where they all dipped at too, like what the age range was and everything. Then isn't what Dr. K said making sense if you haven't developed those skills? Yeah, kind of. I feel like sometimes people look at, people have a particular thing they don't like. So in this case, it might be wokeism or feminism, and they want to use that to explain all the ills of the world. So they say, oh, like young men aren't being spoken to by all of these people, which is like kind of true. But I don't think that that's why people feel so horrible, that they just need like a role model in social media. I think it has to do with how rapidly and insanely the landscape of our world has changed. It's changed a lot. The internet and cell phones have fundamentally altered literally every single part of your life. Every single part of your life is fundamentally changed in ways that make it unrecognizable to how we lived, 35, even 20 years ago. It's unrecognizable. Like, you don't understand, when we played games as kids, we would like have like a fantasy of like, imagine how sick it would be to have like an actual mini map in real life, and every single person has one on your phone, like stuff like that. You just don't even realize how you can communicate anybody. I can take phone calls out of my watch. Like your whole life is just so crazy changed. Like I'm talking to 9,000, 10,000 people right now all across the world on some stream. Like, yeah, like everything is just so unbelievably changed. I don't understand how you can say all you've said and still think suicide is always due to mental illness. I don't know if I would say mental illness. I just think that like something is going on in the brain that's not good. Or there's some like bad thought pattern that's happening that somebody needs to break out of. Table 1, leading cause of death in the US by select age groups. Oh, here's where suicide is. 10 to 14? Jesus. I guess, as sad and as weird as that is, actually, it probably makes sense. Because from 10 to 14, nothing really should be killing you, right? You're not in very many dangerous environments for people to be killing you, and you shouldn't really be dying of diseases at that age. So I guess it kind of makes sense from 10 to 14 that suicide would be up there, and then unintentional injury would be number 1. How do you think your piano learning would have changed if you would have been diagnosed/medicated for ADHD sooner? I don't want to do a cringe ADHD is my superpower bullshit, but the hyperfocus autistic bullshit might have helped me learn a little piano early on. Because I remember I grabbed the sheet music there was a website called OC Remix where you had piano songs, or people make remixes of video game music, and there's a piano song called Genova for classical piano, and I learned that whole song. It was the first song I ever learned, but that was an autistic method of learning. It was literally, because I didn't have any piano background at all, so learning how to like put my fingers and like every single fucking measure, like it was like, that was like the most autistic thing I've ever done in my life. I think it took me like 6 months. It's just the most retarded thing ever. I don't know if I would have done that. If I would have medicated for ADHD, I probably would just learn piano better. I would have started with something different, probably. Maybe, who knows? Can you still do it now? Play that song? I don't think so. I don't even know the... If I saw the music, I could probably relearn it pretty quickly, I think, but it would take me a long time. It wouldn't take me a long time. I just said pretty quickly. That was contradictory. I'm just saying words. Fuck. Okay. You got way more people dying as you get older. Damn. Oh, this breaks it up by age bracket more, too. So 15 to 24, 6,500 died of suicide. 35 to 44, 7,800. 25 to 34 is 8,800.
We must reconnect with ourselves, right? So when you're kind of saying like, why does everyone think, oh, I need to like achieve this, I need to make this money and things like that. Where did you learn that you should do all that? You learned all that from the outside.
Instagram,
right? So we get fed all of these ideas because if you look at all these influencers, what are they doing? They're never crying. They're smiling. Some of them will even pay very attractive women to take pictures with them.
Well, some of them are crying, but they're...
This is a super true point, and it's really toxic. And again, people do not talk about it enough. It used to be said a long time ago. I heard this like a decade ago. Don't compare your behind the scenes to everybody else's highlight reels. Instagram is not real life. Even the friends you have on Instagram is not real life. Yeah, nobody's life is as good as they show on social media. God, that's so toxic, especially for teenage girls. Holy shit.
Crying and uploading it for ulterior motives, right?
Absolutely, and I think a lot of them are genuinely suffering too. But then it's also like, I mean, there's all kinds of weird stuff going on. So one thing is like people say that men, we don't allow men to be emotional nowadays, but people say, oh, men are allowed to cry. This is something that I experienced even in my marriage, where we allow men to cry, but we don't allow men to be angry. But why is it are men no longer allowed to be angry? Just think about it for a second. So anger is just a completely normal emotion, right? But if I'm in a situation where I'm in an argument with my wife and I feel emotion A and I express emotion A and she feels emotion B and she expresses emotion B, these two things should be equal, right? We as both human beings get to express what we feel. Now, in the case of me expressing anger and her expressing sadness, she's crying and I'm yelling. Suddenly, I become a villain.
It's so...
I hate this so much. And it's 100% true. In some ways, because of my natural disposition, if I wanted to be a piece of shit, I can get away with a lot more than I should be able to. I don't know if my conflict resolution, actually, now that I think about it, I don't know if it's more feminine or masculine, but in my, depending on how I'm in my mood, but like my form of, if I'm getting upset, the more upset I am, the more I just shut down and avoid. Like, just don't talk to me, get the fuck away from me, go to the room, I don't want to talk to you, right? So technically, I'm never like the instigator of like a crazy scenario, whereas most of the people that I date for women tend to want to resolve problems right now and then become angry. They'll start screaming, they'll start shouting, like, blah, 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 blah. So in some ways, it's easy for me. I've said this a lot in the past, that like, I understand why people get mad or want to hurt me or hit me or whatever. It makes sense because of the differences in conflict resolution. Because when somebody's shutting down and you're getting emotional, them shutting down is the worst feeling in the world. So you want to keep amping up the anger until they respond to you. But then if you are a guy and you're shouting at a girl, or like if you're both in an argument and you're upset and the girl is crying and the guy is shouting, the guy is automatically the villain. That is such an unbelievably frustrating dynamic, because anytime you're having a fight around friends or somebody else is witnessing and then the girl is like crying and then you're angry and you're shouting, she's automatically in the right. You lose. You completely have lost. Nothing is more disarming in a fight than a woman's tears. You have no weapon and now and not only have you lost the fight, you're actually the fucking bad guy. And the most frustrating thing there is that, and this was why so many of mine, the last 2 years with Melina, I repeated this line over and over again, although she never gave a fuck, it never mattered. But I'd constantly say this, like, listen, if you're upset at me, you have to talk to somebody else. If we're both upset and you're crying and I'm shouting, I cannot be in a situation where I have to bring all of my emotions under control and then take care of all of your emotions while you're mad at me. That will I will never be able to, I can't do that. Maybe in 10 years, maybe when I become a wise old six, but I cannot deal completely with everything I've got going on emotionally, because I already feel upset about whatever we're fighting about. If we're shouting, we're obviously got to that point. The fact that the guy is expected to 100% take care of all of his emotions and bring everything out of wraps, and then take care of the woman's emotions, and that usually involves some amount of like admitting you're wrong or seeing their side of the argument more than they see yours, that's way too much. I can't do that. It's like, it's a parental role. I hate that. I can never do that. I will never do that. I'll never be with a woman where I have to take care of both ends of the emotions on a fight. I fucking hate that. But if you're the guy, again, and you're angry or shouting, you're automatically seen as being in the wrong. That's so annoying. Ugh.
So interesting. I saw a viral tweet yesterday. It was someone Googling my wife is yelling at me, what should I do? And then my husband is yelling at me, what should I do? When they Googled, my husband is yelling at me, what should I do? Domestic violence helpline comes up as like a Google pop-up. When you Google, my wife is yelling at me, what should I do? Nothing comes up.
Yeah.
Because obviously, as you said, in the case of villainization, I know
Wow, Aridu, thanks for the tier 5 summer.
that most domestic violence comes from men, but it's interesting that we see the emotion, we interpret the emotions entirely differently because of that.
Absolutely, right? So we as a society will say like, oh, men need to be in touch with their emotions, but not anger. And then this is what really screws men, because as men, we are socialized and conditioned to only feel anger. This is the only emotion you're allowed to feel as a man growing up. And this is the one emotion that gets demonized when you're older. So I'll give you a simple example. So like I used to get bullied a lot, right? So when I get bullied in school, like what am I supposed to do, Stephen?
In school, well, it depends if you can fight back.
Absolutely, right? It's fighting back. Like you didn't say talk to the teacher. You didn't say ask for help. You didn't say cry about it, because if I cry about it, what's going to happen, Stephen?
You're gonna get bullied more.
Absolutely. So we turn every emotion. So men experience anger as something called an umbrella emotion. We literally suppress and are conditioned to suppress all other emotions except for anger. And then if you talk
If the girl's shouting and you are chill, doesn't she look the villain as well? I might be biased because of my own life and my own experiences, but no, I think basically no matter what, girls always tend to look better in fights, unless the girl's literally getting physically violent. But even at that, then she's like barely starting to move the needle. But usually if a girl is shouting and a guy's just chilling there and like whatever, usually the guy looks like he doesn't care and people think that the guy's wound the girl up or made the girl feel upset or like, I don't know. I feel like generally when emotions are getting heated in a male-female fight, I think all the deference almost instantly goes to the woman. It's just frustrating.
to men about their experience of life, anger is always the first thing that comes out of their mouth. Someone breaks up with you, how do you feel about it? Do you feel ashamed? No, that's not what we say. I feel pissed off. How could she do this to me? And then we vent that anger on the internet, and then this turns into misogyny, right? And then we get demonized for it. And it's not that there isn't...
One of the things about emotions and feelings too that I feel like isn't talked about enough is it's the same thing that I say about biases. Your goal is never to eliminate your biases. It's true of Stoicism as well, by the way. Your goal isn't to eliminate your biases. Your goal is to be able to recognize them and then control them effectively. The same thing is true for feelings. When you have feelings, you can't always control those feelings. Now, CBT, you can go back and audit your thoughts and maybe evolve over time. But for the most part, you can't like control your feelings. But you can control your behavior in response to those feelings. And when I say behavior, I don't necessarily just mean crying or getting upset. I mean like screaming or shouting or hurting or hitting, right? So if you're a man and you get angry, you shouldn't be hitting somebody or screaming at them, but you can get angry. You can raise your voice. Like it's fine to have anger. And same thing with a woman. And this is vice versa too. If you're a woman, you can get angry, you can get upset. If you're a guy, you can get angry, you can get upset, whatever. You can cry, you can shout a little, it's fine. It's the actions, the behaviors are the things that you should be focused on more. And one of the big problems growing up, I think, is for women, since crying is like generally sadness, crying is a more acceptable form of emotions, they kind of get more time through development to work through that. Whereas for a man, if you're angry, people don't generally tell you, well, just go hit a punching bag. If you do that, they'll think that you're like unhinged. I think I had a few of those conversations when I was a kid. Sometimes I get mad, I go to my bedroom and I like punch my pillow. And I think my mom got mad at me once for doing that. I was like, it's just a pillow, Mom. It shouldn't matter.
Should be harshly judged if we act on those kinds of emotions. I'm not saying that that's the case. But what we also need to consider is that the men who are saying these kinds...
How do you feel about the casual man hate a lot of women have that is socially acceptable, but the other way around is the worst thing ever? I think it's just a reverse. It's a reaction. I understand why women feel that way, especially in response to how it's gone in the past, but like it's swung too far the other way now. It's really cringe. You can't have all these spaces where people are like, yeah, I hate men, fuck men, blah, 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 blah. It's just cringe. It's super, super, super cringe.
...of toxic things are saying that for a reason. This is because of their upbringing. This is because of the world that they lived in, right? So we're conditioned to only experience anger. Even sadness gets turned into anger. Shame gets turned into anger. Fear gets turned into anger, right? So if I'm afraid of something happening, what do I need? I man up, get angry, right? Like, let's go, son, let's go. This is the emotion that we tap into to overcome fear. So we don't feel any of those other emotions and we're left only feeling anger.
At the very heart of aggression, I heard someone say to me once that at the very heart of aggression is some kind of insecurity. But for men, when they encounter that insecurity, they only know how to sort of manifest it as aggression.
So I wouldn't agree with the first thing that at the heart of all anger is insecurity, but I would absolutely agree with the second thing that the only way we know how to respond is with anger. Because
here's the exact quote, just found it. The source of aggression is insecurity. As we are unconsciously aware that our position in life is never secure, people feel increasingly insecure and helpless, so they will be increasingly aggressive and confrontational at a personal and a social level.
I think this is something that I bring up a lot that I get really upset about Fresh and Fit for perpetuating. I don't know if you call this honor culture, hood mentality or whatever, but basically, this is how I feel. If you're a man and you are, I don't know how I would draw this. If you're a man and you've got a lot of things going for you in life, you don't really have much to prove. You don't need to act weird or act ghetto or start fighting people or screaming at people because like, who the fuck cares? Like, you have too much to lose at that point. And you've got like enough to back your reputation. I was like, why the fuck do I do this? But when you have nothing in life, when all you have is your name or your reputation, things like violence or aggression sometimes might be the only way that you feel like you can stake out a position in the world. And it's the only way that you can get people to respect you is by showing that you can fight somebody or hurt somebody or whatever, which is cringe. I think I understand why people without much to their name do that. It makes sense because when that's all you have, that's what you bound, right? But for people to get further up, the ghetto mentality, that should be abandoned. I think that's really cringe. And it does kind of reek of insecurity, yeah.
So let's tunnel down into that for a second. Okay, so I think that is true on some level, but also I would disagree. So the first thing is that we have parts of our brain, even animals feel anger. But I think that like when two dogs are fighting over territory, I don't think that that's born of some kind of identity of insecurity, right? So if we really look at like the evolutionary purpose of anger, this is my opinion, is that anger is the emotion that we feel to protect our territory. It's a protective emotion. So if I slap you across the face, what's the first thing that you're gonna feel? It's gonna be anger. So if I insult you, you're gonna feel angry. It's fascinating the way that it works. So anger causes our thoughts to be faster. Anger causes our peripheral vision to collapse to 30 degrees. So I only see what's in front of me. And it also makes me less sensitive to pain. So like my nociceptors will actually like start to be suppressed when I feel angry, right? So if I get into a fight, I'm gonna feel it tomorrow, but like while I'm getting hit, I'm not gonna feel it. So I don't think it's born of all insecurity. I think anger is simply an evolutionary response. It's something that we experience to protect ourselves. That's why we feel angry, right? So if I attack baby bear, mama bear is gonna come out angry. So it's really a protective emotion. Now, I agree with the second part of the statement 100%, that when we feel insecure, especially as men, the only way we are taught to deal with our problems is through anger, right? So if I'm feeling insecure, if I'm feeling ashamed of myself, someone's bullying me, what do? I put them in their place, right? I don't try to make peace. I don't complain to someone because no one's gonna take me seriously, right? I have to stand up for myself.
So we've got the first point there about how we remedy this challenge, which is about self-expression, more self-expression. That's what I heard.
Not self-expression, introspection.
Introspection, getting to know ourselves.
Right, so it's very simple. So if you
How is it just a ghetto thing? That makes it sound like only black people act duelish. I mean, you could call it a trailer park thing too. I'm sure it happens there as well.
Look at your idea of what it means to be a man. What percentage of that idea comes out?
Destiny, I know you find it stupid and cringe, but some of us with much to lose would risk it regardless. It's an honor code that you might find ghetto, but it supersedes material wealth. It might supersede material wealth, but it is beneath any other value or virtue that you could have as a man. The easiest thing that a man can do is fight. It is the lowest class, lowest status, least respectful thing that you can ever do in your life. It's one of the easiest things. Men have killed other men through all of human history. Not as many have become educated. Not as many have become leaders. Not as many have been able to take care of their families or protect their loved ones or contribute something to society or do something artistic. Like fighting is one of the baser, lower, most animalistic, barbaric things that you can do. There's nothing respectful about it. There's nothing impressive about it. More often than not leads to your own detriment and the detriment to people around you. It's selfish. It's not honorific unless you're doing it for sport. It can cause you to not be able to take care of other people around you. Like it is one of the lower, baser, most unintelligent ways to resolve any sort of thing. Sorry if that hurts or whatever, but that is just factually the case. With the exception being of like people who are fighting for like causes greater than themselves. Like I would carve out, if you're fighting for your country, if you're in a revolution, if you're in some guerrilla warfare with an oppressive power, whatever, something, then you can carve out things for this. But fighting requires skill to win. No. For street fights, 90% of it is just size, okay? We're being realistic. When you're talking about people fighting on the street, it's not like these guys are like, okay, like let me get my gi on, or here's my UFC MMA. Most of it is just like big people like swinging their fists at each other or falling on each other. You can watch a million fight videos and see that happening. And then also, too, regardless of how well you fight, 2 or 3 or 4 people are always going to beat the shit out of you. Like that's just the case. Like if you're in a society where people are fighting each other, you're not taking on like a crowd of 10 or 20 people. Your pro-social behavior there, your ability to make friends, your ability to be part of a group of people, your ability to maintain connections to others is always going to dramatically supersede your ability to fight, because life is not a series of 1v1s like it's fucking Tekken.
Side of you. And what percentage of that idea comes from within you?
About 90% comes from outside of me.
And that's why 90% of people...
Size and who can take it, strength versus power versus endurance. Yeah, most fights are ended with a sucker punch. What are you talking about, dog? Like...
we're 90%, right? So, and if you look at, I'm sure you know this, and you've probably done this too, if you look at where is the goodness in your life, where does it come from, Stephen? It doesn't come from what other people have told you. They may have told you something, but then you looked within yourself and then you found that to be true.
Yeah.
The goodness in you, the motivation, the really good motivation in you, not chasing things, but the duty that you have, everything that you really strive for, all that good stuff comes from inside you. And the problem is that we live in a world that pulls our attention away from ourselves.
What do you think of Andrew Tateism then?
So as a general rule, I don't comment on people that I don't speak to.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me the features of what you're talking about.
Okay, so the recent wave of internet masculine influencers who have like Bugattis and...
Are you trolling? A trained wrestler who's half the size of an untrained gorilla man will win? Maybe if you have like ultra extensive training, the guy doesn't have any friends or the guy doesn't have any weapons. Maybe, but like, bro.
Lots of women and sports cars, and there's many of them. There's many of them, and they seem to be resonant for some kind of reason.
Also, most people that fight on the street don't have extensive training. It's not like these guys are spending all day in like boxing gyms and then coming out onto the streets to have like their anime battles.
Women and sports cars, and there's many of them. There's many of them, and they seem to be resonant for some kind of reason. That are kind of saying that the way to be a man is to have loads of money, lots of women, these kind of cars, physical strength, and there's just this huge sort of generation of young, typically men, that are now disciples of that religion.
Yeah. So I think if you dislike that toxic masculinity, what we need to understand is it's the people who hate that toxic masculinity that are driving these people towards it. So I know this is kind of crazy. So what's happened is this has grown, right? And as it's grown, what have we done? We've demonized these people. We've said these people are bad. And as we demonize them, what's happened? They've grown stronger. So this is something that's very important to understand. If you are a man and you say, I am suffering today, what is the response that you're going to get?
Shut up.
Absolutely.
Not in those exact words, but that's whatever the words are, that's what they mean.
Now, I want us to be very, very careful, right? So if you're listening to Steven say people tell you to shut up, and your first thought as a listener is, no, that's not true, that's the problem. So if people agree with you, they understand what you're saying, but if they disagree with you, that's the problem. We literally have a man who is telling us right now that your experiences when I say I'm suffering, people tell you to shut up. And then people are going to be judging you for...
Fuck, we're not getting into this a lot, okay? Because this is such a cringe topic. I don't know why anyone would consider Destiny an authority figure on fighting. Like, there is no family out there who's like, the wife is at home taking care of the kids, and like the dad comes home and she's like, how did it go today? And he's like, won 3 more street brawls. Oh my God, thank you. I love you so much. You're such a good husband. Great. Like, no, they want their husbands to fucking get jobs and work and be able to provide for the family. I married this guy because he's an undefeated street fighter. That's great. I married this dude because he can work a 9 to 5 for more than 3 years without getting fired. Like, we have a roof over our heads. We don't need food stamps. That's why I married this dude. Like,
saying that, and they're going to be saying, no, that's not true.
They're going to be saying, shut up.
Absolutely. Right? So this is exactly the problem. So men are struggling right now, and the rest of the world says, no, you're not. You're privileged. You're a man. There's a patriarchy. And I'm not commenting on the sociology of it. There is a patriarchy, whatever. Men have many advantages in life. I've experienced many advantages of being a man. It's absolutely true. Let's not go there. I'm talking about the individual experience of men. So there's one group of people on the planet.
At Destiny, you say that your pro-social abilities matter in societies with violence. Don't you see way more that the most ruthless schizos rise to the top in violent societies? Pro-social behavior doesn't seem to matter there. I don't know firsthand shit about gangs because obviously I've never been in one. But like my guess is going to be that in gangs, there's probably a ton of pro-social behavior. This is why you tend to like wear similar clothes, you hang out with similar friends, you go out and you do graffiti and shit together, you all hang out together. That like, my understanding is, this was the case with the KKK, I'm sure it's the case with gangs too, that if you're part of a gang, being in a gang doesn't mean that you're like, okay guys, on Saturday, we meet at 1 a.m. on this corner and we go gangbang. We go shoot fucking people up, we murder people. Gangs are probably, it's your groups of friends, it's people that you hang out with, it's people that you see all the time, it's people's houses you go to, it's a whole bunch of social behavior that's shared. And unfortunately, for better and worse, there's like violence and drug trade and whatever, depending where you live, that might be a part of it. But a gang is more than just like your combat unit that you sign up to go out and do war with on Saturday nights and then you never see them otherwise. Like,
who says, yes, your life does suck. And that's these toxic masculine people. They're the only people that truly validate men's experiences. Because everyone else says, why are you complaining? And these guys say, yeah, you're a fucking loser. What are you going to do about it? They at least meet you where you're at. And they say, yes, your life is hard, and I will show you a way to make it better. Whereas the rest of the world says, no, your life isn't hard. What are you complaining about? And I've seen this as a doctor. I've seen patients who are complaining about pain, women who are complaining.
Oh, he's taking this side because he can't fight and won't let it make him feel less manly. Yes, that's actually what's going on. It's a giant cope, and I realized that the only value that I can contribute to the world was going out to fight people with my fists. And now I'm trying to cope and say that like, fuck, well, since I don't do that, these other things I have must be better. Listen, whatever you want to think, you can think it, but the rest of the world thinks you're a loser. And even people in your community want you to get out and not be a loser. So, but listen, whatever you think, knock yourself out, my dude.
Complaining about pain because
or don't knock yourself out, knock your opponent out.
Have an internal bleed within the wall of their uterus that cannot get detected. And they're saying, I'm hurting, and we ignore this person's pain. And that's when things go bad. So for years and years and years, we have ignored the struggles of men. And there's one group on the planet who accepts them with open arms. And the more that we demonize them, so when someone starts believing this toxic masculinity, what is the response? Do people ever ask, like, help me understand what your life is like? Like, what do you like about this person? Because everyone's going to them for a reason, but we never bother to ask, why are you listening to this person? What does this mean to you? We see these posts all the time in our community. My boyfriend is getting into this stuff. My son is getting this stuff. How do I stop it? hold on a second. Don't try to stop it. Understand it first. Because everyone's trying to stop it and no one is bothering to listen to what the experience of these men are. And that's why it's getting worse and worse and worse as we try to stop it.
So if I'm the mother of a son who is watching a lot of these sort of toxic male influences online, what would be a better approach versus just banning the computer and telling them that that's toxic and not to look at it?
Help me understand what you like about this. What is it like to be a man in today's day and age? How do you feel about yourself? How does it feel knowing that 70 to 80% of women want you to make more money than them, and yet 60% of people who graduate from college are women? So men are living in a world today
I think that number for the women wanting the guys to make more money, I think that's down to around 55% now. I need to look this up, but
are
it used to be really high, but the number has gradually gone down over time as things have changed.
Expectations to meet. And so, like, what is it like to be someone who fundamentally has no chance at success? Right? These are the kinds of things that you need to say to these people. You need to give them an alternate place to go where they can be heard and helped, supported, and understood. See, anytime we make a judgment, our mind already has a conclusion. There's nothing left to learn anytime we're judgmental. So what do we do to all these people who are toxic men? We even create the word toxic. We literally label them as bad in some way. And I'm not saying that the behavior isn't toxic, but what I'm trying to point out is that even in our language, there is so much harsh judgment. So I once had a patient.
We both just did it, didn't we?
Absolutely. So I once had a patient who was smearing feces all over the school. So adolescent kid, right? And when you have a kid who's literally taking a shit and wiping it on the walls and stuff, what happens? The kid gets punished. Kid gets punished again and again and again. The one really sad thing is no one ever asks, why are you doing this? What's going on inside you? Because healthy kids don't do this. It's only kids who've been traumatized in some way. And as I've worked with incels, as I've worked with people who are toxically masculine, it always starts with trauma. And when I say always, it is a clinical experience, but I'm talking about 100%. So 100% of people start on this path by getting hurt in some way, by getting taken advantage of in some way, by sacrificing something and not getting something in return. And they have their share of responsibility too. I'm not saying that they're hapless victims, but I think that people who are raised with love and compassion and do have connections don't go down this road.
You're so passionate about this, aren't you? Because I feel like your eyes have seen in your practice some pretty heartbreaking things.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like, see, unless we are willing to be what these people need, they're going to continue going down the toxic masculinity route. Someone needs to start offering these people safe haven. No matter what they say, or not no matter, I think there should be consequences for actions. But so this is as someone who's worked in a jail, right? So this is what's kind of interesting if you really think about it. People will judge me for talking to or even trying to support people who are toxically masculine. And they're like, oh my God, you're such an asshole. You're giving these people a platform. How could you make the world a worse place? And then I tell them I worked in a jail for 3 months. And they're like, oh, look at you. You're so compassionate. You're working with these people who are like criminals. And like, oh my God. I don't think they realize that anyone you see on social media is 10 times better than the people that I worked with in jail. These are people who are actual pedophiles, actual rapists, right? Not just talking about it. Maybe the people on social media are too. I don't know. And so it's really interesting the way that our mind automatically judges things. And so if we really want to fix this problem, and I think we need to fix this problem, it's just my take. I mean, I'm not I'm a big fan of like compassion and trying to support other human beings. I'm not saying that that's always the right answer. I think sometimes you may need things like war or violence or whatever. I mean, there may be causes for it. But generally speaking, I think that like demonizing these people isn't working.
Is there anything else that we haven't covered in the remedies to this sort of male crisis?
Why do you think people are attracted more to gotchas like whatever podcast rather than looking for someone like Dr. K that seems to have actual understanding of the subject? It's nice to have like snappy, easy, quick answers to things rather than doing a lot of other work because that is cringe. Kind of like why people want, like a fad diet or a fad workout program rather than just like going to the gym or eating less food or changing how you eat. I think people are always drawn towards that kind of stuff. And then there's the added thing now that everything also has to play into whatever worldwide ideology you have. Like every single part of your life is now a part of your fucking political ideology. It feels like that's different than it used to be. I'm trying to think if I'm like recent biasing this or not, but I feel like back in the day, every single thing you did wasn't like a reflection of your political ideology. Like if you went to the gym, that didn't necessarily mean you were a Democrat or Republican, or it didn't necessarily mean you were a soy boy or a conservative alpha male. Like it was just like different people, different things. But now it feels like every single thing in your life has to play in your political ideology. I don't know why, but maybe it used to be like that. I feel like it's gotten worse, but I don't know. Hi, what's up, babe?
Okay, hi. How are you?
Benny emailed me this morning and he was like, where was it? He said, Stephen, how are you? How do you like the aired debate? I was sorry it begins with a long, boring speech by Finkelstein, but people tell me we came out okay, Benny. He's such a like boomer when it comes to email. It's kind of funny.
He seemed to enjoy himself.
Yeah, for sure.
I've often noticed when he's sometimes doing lectures and things like that, if he gets kind of heckled, he sometimes gets a bit flustered and like stumbles a bit, but he actually did really well in that, I thought.
Do you think does he? I saw one where he got heckled recently. And he had
said he'd rather be a racist than boring.
Yes! Yeah. What a great epic Destiny quote. I thought that was funny, but...
And that was pretty funny. I was getting very like Frodo and Bilbo Baggins vibes when the camera was on both of you, but you both have the hair as well. But
True.
There was something he said at the end when they said you shouldn't, like, if you don't think international law matters, you can't complain about October 7th. And I think Benny Morris said, where did I complain? I just said they acted like barbarians, as if to say, where did I complain? As if to say, like, bring it. Because I guess that's the point, though, is like, if you renounce international law, then the problem is that, that especially around conflict, then the problem is that, well, that's fine for Israel because they just win. Just it's not fine for Palestinians. Yeah.
I think the issue is internet. I think here's the issue: is international law has never really helped or been favorable to Israel ever. It's never protected them or helped them or assisted them in any way, size, shape, or form, really. So it probably feels kind of shitty that, like in 48, when everybody was attacking, nobody cared about international law. In 47, you know, the Arabs rejected the partition plan. No one cared about UN resolutions or international law. In 67, in 73, like when they're getting attacked, it's not like people are like, oh, international law, don't do it. Like they're all still fighting. So once they've lost so many wars over and over and over again, and then later on, they're like, okay, guys, well, now we need to adhere to international law. Israel's probably like, well, fuck this. Like, what the fuck does international law matter? It never helped us in the past. So why are you guys allowed to invoke it now to end your disagreements with us? Skiller S, thanks for the 93 viewers. I think it's probably the issue, yeah.